Ex-Millionaires of Reddit, what made you lose all your money? My dad is an ex-millionaire. He's a fucking wizard at starting successful businesses. His problem is he can't let them go. He's the boss owner who never hires a manager that's not family because he just doesn't trust anyone else to run it. He drove $3 million companies into the ground because he couldn't keep up with his own success, and refused to hire people to do it for him. I have a relative who is a self-made millionaire many times over. He was the hardest working person I've ever known. As soon as he graduated from high school, he got his real estate license and became a successful realtor. Within 30 years he opened a successful construction company, a store that sold kitchen cabinets, and owned over 20 rental properties. This wasn't enough for him and he started renting out his properties to people that would pay him more to grow pot in. His granite company was used to ship the pot across state lines, and now he's sitting in jail facing a minimum of 10 years. The government is coming after all his rentals and money. Not me, technically, but my grandma. So a little backstory. My great-grandparents owned a luxury fur coat business and made an absolute shitload of money. When my grandma and her brother, my great-uncle, had moved out from their parents' house, they were given a sizable amount of money, not millions, but far more than the average person might get in such a situation, to fund their adulthood. Great-uncle ended up opening 2 businesses using this money, a gas station and a used car lot. He made pretty good money running these 2 businesses. We'll get back to him a little bit later in the story. Grandma, however, took this money that was given to her and blew a lot of it on fancy clothes, vacations, etc. She then got married to my grandpa and had 3 kids, and then he ended up cheating on her and took a bunch of her remaining money in the divorce. Meanwhile, great-uncle was furthering his business ventures, opening a payphone business, helicopter tours, and all kinds of other shit. He was rolling in money at this point. Some time later, my great-grandparents died, within months of each other. They then split their inheritance 2 ways, 1/3 of it going to my great-uncle, and 2/3 going to my grandma. The argument was that he was a wealthy bachelor with no kids, and she was struggling to get by with a secretary job while raising 3 kids by herself. This ticked off my great-uncle quite a bit, since he knew what she had done with her previous huge handout. He was mad about the inheritance not being 50-50, but not something that he'd quit talking to my grandma over. Not yet, anyway. So, what do you think my grandma did with her huge windfall of money? Did she open a business? No. Did she invest it in some way? Nah. Did she do absolutely anything productive whatsoever? Of fucking course not. The first thing she did was buy a great big house in a nice neighborhood. Actually, no wait, that was the second thing she did. The first thing she did was quit her job. Then, she bought a luxury car. Then came luxury clothes for my mom, aunt and uncle. Then she hired a full-time live-in maid. Then came the vacations to all the hottest vacation spots of the day. Gourmet meals every day. All the toys and gadgets that they could possibly want. You name it, she bought it. So it should come as no surprise that she burned through the entire inheritance in less than a year. 2/3 of the money that her parents had worked their whole lives for, more money than anyone should reasonably ever be able to spend, she blew through in under 12 months. But she kept spending, driving herself into debt. They lost the house, lost the luxury car, and even had to sell all their fancy clothes and toys, just to pay the enormous debt she had gained. And then she came to my great-uncle's office and asked him for money. She was promptly thrown out by security, and was told that he would never speak with her again. And he never did. Imagine my surprise when I grew up in what was basically the borderline of total poverty, and my family tells me that they used to be filthy stinkin' rich. Because of what my grandma did, my great-uncle more or less cut off contact with her side of the family for years. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I ever met the man. I think later on in his life, he felt bad about punishing the rest of the family when all of the fault lied on my grandma, and he started to talk with us every so often, but we knew to never ask him for anything, even though we were all struggling. When my grandma was on her deathbed, she begged for us to have my great-uncle come to the hospital so she could apologize to him. When told about this, his response was basically, "I don't give a fuck." And then, in an almost ironic twist, he married an obvious gold digger, 30-ish years his junior, who had already survived 2 other dead old rich guys.
And then when he died, she got everything, disconnected their phone line, and disappeared like a fucking bandit. His actual family got nothing. *TLDR. Great-grandparents were rich. Great-uncle becomes a successful businessman. Grandma blows every last penny of their inheritance in record time. Great-uncle cuts off contact with her after she begs him for money. She dies alone. He dies and has his entire inheritance taken by his gold-digging wife. I'm still poor. My dad, not me. He made some really shrewd stock market investments after he retired. They were options on an oil refiner at a time when the USA had a real shortage of them. My dad had done a lot of research on this and studied the situation carefully. He got rich to the tune of maybe $2 million. He could have been set for life. My dad was already a really smart guy. He has a PhD in mathematics and was a highly respected big-brain professional all the way back into the 1960s. However, he thought this took him to the next level. He bought a lot of newer options in the same company. I suggested to him that he diversify, put a bunch of money into something closer to an annuity or another conservative investment that would give him plenty of income forever. I told him if he did that, he would always be rich. Well, he is pretty far from that now. I haven't said a thing about that to him since he lost everything. I did what I could, at the time, to save him from himself. But who was I? It pains me to see how it played out for him. He did a lot of things right in life. He deserved better, but there's no deserve in securities investing. Morals of this story: 1. You aren't an investment genius after your first blockbuster win. You need a track record. 2. Diversify. Hypothetical millionaire. I bought $100 worth of Bitcoin when they were about $1 each. I sold them when they were about $2.50 each and was so happy I made money from internet coins. As of the moment I am typing this, those coins would be worth $1,855,000. A common template for wealth loss is underestimating the role of luck in the initial wealth accumulation, and, as a result, taking irresponsible risks on new ventures and/or maintaining lifestyles that overestimate future earning potential. I have seen this with some folks who made money in finance in the 80s and 90s. While extremely smart and hard-working, their path to tens or hundreds of millions of dollars were also pretty lucky. I watched a guy at a casino somehow get a loan against his house, about $200K, and lose it. He looked suicidal. Apparently he was already in almost $50K and thought he could win it back. I got hired there, and I would leave on Friday and return Monday, and see the same people in the same clothes, who pissed and shit themselves and were still sitting at the blackjack table gambling. Cocaine is a hell of a drug. Go to our Wall Street bets and filter by the loss flare. You know how to end up with $1 million after a year of day trading. Start with $2 million. My alarm clock that woke me up. Divorce. I was a millionaire, got divorced, which nearly sent me to insolvency, buckled down and worked my butt off and am remillionaired. Guys, don't underestimate the pernicious impact on net worth a bad divorce can have. Gambling and spouse terminal illness. I was a multi-millionaire for 2 weeks. Then the vacation was over and we exchanged our dongs for euros. Crypto millionaire. Still worth a lot, with my accounts about $850,000 today. I have a lot of XRP, but in 2017 I was worth about $3.5 million before the crash. Lowest was $300,000. I'm a hodler, so don't day trade usually. Somewhere here there's a billionaire laughing because they're an ex-millionaire too. Not me, but an acquaintance. He got caught not paying taxes and dealing in stolen goods. He spent time in federal prison and lost everything, including his wife. Crime does not always pay. First husband. Was making $1 million a year. He was enjoying life, spending frivolously, but bringing in enough that it didn't matter. We divorced, but amicably. No alimony, no child support, he just paid for whatever the kids needed. Then he got leukemia. He fought like hell for 3 years. The last 2 years were very expensive. It was worth it. Money won't make you happy, but the lack of it can destroy you. The kids ans I can take comfort in knowing that, truly, there was nothing else possible. His millions bought his kids 2 more years of dad. And I'm glad for him that he enjoyed his life while he could. We were close, then the Great Recession hit. Lost 60% in 3 years. Just updated the balance sheet today, we're almost back. Who knows what will happen in the next 24 to 36 months though. My grandfather was a thrifty man. Always was a DIY guy, hated hiring contract workers except for my father, whom he introduced to my mother, and worked for nearly 40 years at our local GM plant. His savings, myriad cash deposits, and investments over the years netted him a net worth of about $2 or $3 million. After walking off the job at GM after a scuffle with the plant management, he went into business for himself and became a landscaper and evergreen farmer at 64 years old, earning government contracts with county and local agencies, which netted him another sizable chunk of money. His sister's husband did the same thing essentially, and this is where my aunt comes in. We will call her Karen. Karen worms her way into my great-aunt's life, and as my great-aunt approached her 80s started becoming more frail, and Karen took care of her, which means she had my great-aunt sign over power of attorney and immediately signs everything over to herself. Brand new house, all 3 cars, RV, everything. Consigns my great-aunt to a convalescent home where she died, the will having been officially amended to award everything not already taken by Karen to Karen. My other great-aunt died suddenly and left my mother as her executor of her modest will, which was basically the stuff in her house, as she was in the process of selling the house. I was very young, but I remember Mom loading me and my 2 brothers into the car and flying down the highway to beat Karen to the house before anything turned up missing. We were successful and Mom got to inventory and disperse everything properly. We ended up with, of all things, her turn-of-the-century pasta crank and her big box of recipes. Grandpa by this point had developed cancer, and slowed down his business. Now 75 years old, he had a nice, modest house on a nice chunk of extremely valuable land thanks to the explosive development there. Mom takes time off work to help Grandma care for him, until he too passes away, leaving everything to Grandma. At this point, we move into Grandma's house to help her around the house and to help her close and liquidate the business assets. After about a year, Karen worms her way in like a tick and things start disappearing, like farm equipment, and other things. Her daughter's husband also had gone into the storage barn and trashed out a lot of family heirlooms, which also was where we kept a lot of our furniture from our home, which all ended up in a fire pit behind the barn. It wasn't long after this that Karen convinced Grandma to let her handle her finances and Karen evicts us. Within 2 years, they sold the family home and land, liquidated all of Grandpa's stocks and bonds, and fled to Florida. Karen had once again gained power of attorney and legally stole all of Grandma's remaining assets. Grandma died ignominiously when she was given an insulin shot 20 times her supposed dose, and she went into DKA and died slowly and horribly in brain death. Out of an estimated $4 million inheritance, Mom and her 2 sisters were given an equal inheritance of $12,000. Karen kept the house, the cars, and ended up burning through everything. Obviously this ended up shattering the family, and now none of us speak to the other.